Let me ask you something. What if I told you that the piece of gear you trust the most, your faithful, old-school bite indicator, is actually the #1 reason you're going home empty-handed? It sounds crazy, I know. For years, we've trusted what we were taught. But today, we're going to expose a hard truth about those grandpa-style bobbers and spring indicators. I promise, by the end of this video, you will look at that piece of tackle completely differently. We're going to show you not just why it's failing, but how it's failing. So get ready for a revelation. And let's start with a question for the comments right now. What kind of bite indicator are you currently using on your rod? Almost every angler has one. It's that thick, often brightly colored plastic float, or that stiff piece of steel that serves as a spring bobber. Maybe it was passed down from your dad, or it's the first one you ever bought. It's a symbol of tradition. It's what we all learned on. The logic seems unshakable. You see it twitch or go down, you set the hook. For decades, this has been the standard operating procedure. But here's the problem we ignore. Fish have gotten smarter. They live in pressured waters, and while our lures, lines, and rods have evolved, many of us are still using bite detection technology from 50 years ago. We've been slow to adapt one of the most critical parts of our entire setup, and it's causing us to miss countless fish. First, let's talk about the main enemy of a good hook set: resistance. The single biggest flaw of a traditional Debunking or grandpa's bobber is its stiffness. These things are often made from thick plastic or unrefined metal. They are designed to be durable, not sensitive. Imagine you're a cautious perch or a finicky bluegill. You see a small morsel, a tiny jig, just hanging there. You approach it slowly and you don't smash it. You gently inhale it, testing to see if it feels right. The instant you do, that stiff indicator up top refuses to give. It creates immediate, unnatural tension on the line. What do? You spit it out in a fraction of a second. Now let's visualize what's happening under the water. Picture your tiny jig perfectly presented. A big crappie glides up to it. The fish doesn't chomp down. It simply opens its mouth and flares its gills, sucking the jig in with a small amount of water. This is an incredibly subtle movement. With a stiff indicator, the line barely tightens. The indicator might dip a millimeter, a movement so small you'd mistake it for a tremble in your hand. But the fish, it feels that pullback. It feels that something isn't right. That jig should have no weight, no resistance. That little bit of tension is an alarm bell telling the fish, danger, this is a trap. And just like that, the bait is ejected, and you never even knew you had a customer. The direct result of this stiffness is what we all hate, the phantom bite. You feel a tap, 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 and then nothing. Or you see the indicator twitch once, you set the hook, and you reel in an empty line. You were not too slow. The fish wasn't just playing with your bait. The truth is, the fish had the bait fully in its mouth. That first tap was the fish inhaling it. The immediate tension from your stiff indicator caused the fish to spit it out. That second tap you felt, or the twitch you saw, was the jig being ejected from the fish's mouth. You weren't feeling the bite, you were feeling the rejection. You were always one step behind the action because your gear was feeding you delayed information. Let's move on to another hidden flaw: material memory. Many older spring bobbers are made of simple flat steel or plastic that has been bent into shape. Over time, and especially in the cold, these materials develop a memory. You might bend it down to get the right tension for your lure, but after a few fish or a long day on the ice, it doesn't return to its original straight position. It stays slightly bent. This is a huge problem. A compromised indicator no longer gives you a true reading of what's happening. It creates slack in your system or provides a false sense of tension, making it even harder to detect those ultralight bites from pressured fish. So how does this material memory fail you in a real-life fishing scenario? Imagine you're set up on a good spot. You catch a fish, and the indicator bends way down. You unhook the fish and drop your line back in the hole. But now your indicator is still slightly curved downwards from the last fight. It doesn't sit straight anymore. Your brain is trained to watch for that initial drop from a straight position, but now the starting point is already low. A subtle bite that would normally cause a quarter-inch dip barely moves the indicator at all. You're effectively fishing with a less sensitive tool than you were 10 minutes ago, all because the material has failed to reset itself. Now for a very common, yet often overlooked problem, the weight issue. Fishing has become a finesse game. We are using lighter and lighter lines and smaller, denser tungsten jigs. A typical tungsten jig for panfish might weigh 1 gram or even half a gram. Now look at that old-school spring bobber. It's a thick piece of metal. It has weight. In many cases, the indicator itself is too heavy to be properly loaded by these modern finesse jigs. The jig doesn't have enough mass to put a proper bend in the indicator. It's like trying to weigh a feather on a truck scale. The scale is technically working, but it's not the right tool for the job. Let's put this into a real-world example. You tie on a beautiful new tungsten jig, the tiny kind that crappies can't resist. You lower it into the water, you watch your spring bobber. Ideally, the weight of the jig should pull the indicator down into a gentle downward curve. This pre-loaded tension is what allows you to see both down bites and up bites, but with your heavy, grandpa-style bobber, the jig just hangs. The indicator barely flexes. It's sitting almost straight out. You have essentially created slack in your system. A fish can now pick up that jig, move a few inches, and you will see absolutely nothing on your end. Your indicator isn't indicating anything. The consequence of an improperly loaded indicator is a completely unnatural presentation. A key part of jigging is the fall. You lift the jig and then you let it fall on a semi-slack line. That fall is what often triggers a strike, but if your indicator is too stiff and heavy, it hinders that natural fall. As the jig tries to flutter down, the stiff indicator dampens the movement and pulls against it. Instead of a natural, enticing drop, your jig performs a weird, stilted parachute drop. The fish see this. They know that a real insect or minnow doesn't fall like that. You are unintentionally making your lure less attractive. Let's shift our focus above the water for a moment to visibility. We often choose our bobbers and indicators based on how well we can see them. Bright orange, chartreuse, thick profiles. They stand out great against the snow or the dark water. But we forget who else we are signaling. We are signaling the fish. While fish may not have the same analytical brain as us, they are masters of pattern recognition. They know what their environment looks like. They know what natural food sources look like. They are highly sensitive to movement and things that seem out of place. An old, thick bobber creates a large, obvious profile. Try to imagine the fish's perspective for a second. You are a wary yellow perch suspended 10 feet below the ice. You're looking up toward the light. You see a tasty-looking morsel dangling below. But directly above it, you also see a large, clunky, brightly colored object that is moving in perfect unison with the food. Every time the food jiggles, that big thing jiggles. It casts a shadow. It looks unnatural. It screams danger. For a young, aggressive fish, this might not matter. But for that larger, wiser fish you're really after, it's a deal breaker. They will either ignore your bait completely or approach with extreme caution. Now let's talk about the elements. Specifically wind and current. A big, stiff, unaerodynamic bite indicator is a sail. It catches the wind horribly. Picture yourself on the ice on a blustery day. The wind is whipping across the surface. Your old indicator is bouncing and dipping and jiggling all over the place. It's impossible to tell what is a real bite and what is just the wind. You are constantly on edge, thinking you have a bite, only to realize it's another gust. This leads to what we call angler fatigue. You lose focus because you are constantly being fed false information by your gear. This brings us to the frustrating problem of the false positive. Every time your windblown indicator dips, your brain registers it as a potential bite. Your muscles tense. You get ready to set the hook. This happens over and over. After an hour of this, you're mentally drained. Even worse, you become desensitized. When a real but subtle bite finally does happen, you're more likely to dismiss it as just the wind again. You have trained yourself to ignore the movements of your indicator because it has been lying to you all morning. The tool that is supposed to help you is actively working against you, costing you focus and, ultimately, fish. Okay, this next point is one of the most important, and it's where old-school indicators fail miserably. We have to talk about the up bite. An up bite happens when a fish, typically a crappie or a bluegill, eats your jig and continues to swim upwards. This action takes the weight of the jig off the line. Instead of your indicator going down, it should rise up, often back to its straight, resting position. This is an extremely common way for panfish to bite, especially when they are neutral or inactive. They simply swim up, inhale the bait, and suspend there. It's a very subtle take. So how do old, stiff bobbers fail to show an up bite? It all goes back to the lack of proper tension. As we discussed, your lightweight jig often isn't heavy enough to put a good bend in a stiff indicator. The indicator is already sitting nearly straight. So when a fish comes from below and lifts that jig, the indicator has nowhere to go. It can't rise up because it's already up. It might wiggle a tiny bit as the line goes slack, but there is no clear, visible signal that a fish is on your line. You are completely blind to one of the most common types of bites in the winter. Let's paint a classic scenario that I guarantee has happened to you. You are staring at your rod, waiting. 10 feet below, a big crappie glides in, rises up, and gently inhales your jig. The fish just sits there, suspended, with the jig in its mouth. Your stiff indicator, which was barely bent to begin with, does absolutely nothing. After 5 or 10 seconds, the crappie feels that something is wrong, opens its mouth, and the jig falls out. The indicator might do a little bounce as the tension comes back on the line. You see that bounce and think, must have just missed one. The reality is you had that fish for 10 seconds and never even knew it. This leads us to debunking the sensitivity myth. For years, we believed these old indicators were sensitive. We thought that because we saw them move, they must be working. But what we were really seeing were only the most aggressive strikes. We were only seeing the bites from fish that were so fired up they smashed the bait and ran with it. We were detecting the 10% of fish that hooked themselves. We built our entire understanding of bite detection on these obvious, hard-hitting fish. We told ourselves, if a fish bites, I'll see it. But that was a comfortable lie. So, what are you actually missing? You're missing the other 90%. You are missing the subtle inhales. You are missing the up bites. You are missing the gentle, mouthing bites from curious but cautious fish. You are missing the bite from the biggest, oldest, and smartest fish in the system, the ones who didn't get big by being reckless. Your gear is filtering your reality. It is only showing you a tiny fraction of the activity that is happening around your lure. You might think it was a slow day with only 3 bites, when in reality, you may have had 30 or 40 chances that your gear never told you about. Now let's quickly compare this old technology to modern materials. Today's high-end strike indicators are made from materials like titanium wire, carbon fiber, or high-grade spring steel. These materials are incredibly lightweight, and they have zero memory. They can be perfectly balanced to the weight of even the tiniest 1/50th of an ounce jig. They allow your lure to fall naturally. They are designed to show the absolute slightest amount of pressure, whether it's a fish pulling down or a fish lifting up. They are precision instruments, not just blunt objects. When you finally switch to a properly balanced modern indicator, the difference is truly night and day. Suddenly you will see a world of activity you never knew existed. You'll see the indicator slowly lift and you'll set the hook into a big crappie. You'll see it make a tiny 1/8 inch dip, and you'll reel in a perch that just barely breathed on your bait. It feels like you've unlocked a superpower. You realize that fishing isn't about waiting for a big, obvious signal. It's about reading a language of subtle twitches and gentle lifts, and you can only read that language if you have the right translator. So, here is the final nail in the coffin for the grandpa's bobber. It was a tool designed for a completely different era of fishing. It was designed for a time when people used heavier line, bigger hooks, and larger bait. It was designed for lakes and rivers with less fishing pressure, where fish were more aggressive and less educated. That tool is now obsolete for modern finesse fishing. Holding on to it because of tradition is like using a hammer to turn a screw. It might work eventually if you hit it hard enough, but you are using the wrong tool for the job, and your results will always be subpar. It is time to evolve. So there it is, the uncomfortable truth we had to talk about. That trusted piece of gear, that grandpa's bobber you've had in your tackle box for years, is more than likely a saboteur. Its stiffness, its weight, its memory, and its profile are all working against you. It's hiding the vast majority of bites from your eyes. The most shocking realization, the real whatever Poverot moment, is understanding that for every single bite you thought you missed, there were probably 9 or 10 others that you never even saw at all. This isn't about disrespecting tradition, it's about upgrading our tools to match the challenge of modern pressured fisheries. It's about giving yourself the best possible chance to succeed. Thank you so much for watching and for being open to a new idea. If this video opened your eyes, please hit that like button and be sure to subscribe for more no-nonsense fishing advice that actually helps you catch more fish. Now for the final question. After hearing all of this, are you going to take a hard look at your bite indicator and consider making a change? Let's get a real discussion going in the comments below.